There are moments in life that split everything into before and after. Mine came on a quiet Thursday evening in February when I was sitting on my couch with a cup of tea going cold beside me, reading a text message from my own mother that made the whole room feel smaller. "Claire, the wedding guest list is final. There's no room for you. Please don't make this difficult." Welcome back to Frontline Retribution, the channel for quiet people who get pushed 1 inch too far and the moment the truth finally walks through the front door. If you've ever been the one who showed up when nobody was watching, this story is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I read it 4 times. Then I set my phone face down on the cushion next to me and stared at the wall for a long time. No room for me at my own sister's wedding. My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old. I'm a freelance graphic designer. I work from home. I live alone in a small but decent apartment about 90 minutes from where I grew up, and until that Thursday evening, I had spent my entire adult life believing that no matter how complicated my family was, I would always be included in the moments that mattered. I was not prepared for how wrong I was. To understand what that text message meant, you have to understand my family. And to understand my family, you have to understand one simple truth that I spent most of my childhood trying to pretend wasn't real. My mother had a favourite, and it was not me. My sister Danielle is 3 years younger than me. She has always been the softer, one more agreeable, more decorative in the way my mother valued, more willing to smile through things that deserved to be questioned. Where I pushed back, Danielle went along. Where I asked why, Danielle simply nodded. My mother interpreted this as maturity. I interpreted it, much later in life, as a survival strategy we had each chosen differently. Growing up, I was the one who got the shorter end of every unspoken negotiation in our household. The smaller birthday celebrations, the hand-me-down furniture when we redecorated. The college fund that was slightly less funded because, as my mother once explained without apparent awareness of how it sounded, Danielle was going to need more help. I built my own life with my own hands. My freelance work grew slowly and steadily. I paid my own bills, built my own savings, asked my family for almost nothing. I didn't do that out of bitterness. I did it because I had decided early on that I was going to be someone who didn't need to wait to be chosen. But I still loved them. That's the part that made everything harder. I loved Danielle in the complicated, layered way you love someone you've shared a childhood with, someone who has seen you cry over things you'd never admit to anyone else. Someone who once held your hand during a thunderstorm when you were 7 and she was 4. Someone who knows the specific way your mother's voice changes when she's building toward disappointment. We weren't close in our adult years. Distance and different lives, and the quiet weight of a family dynamic that had never been fully discussed, had created a gap between us. But when Danielle called me in December to tell me she was engaged to a man named Marcus, who seemed steady and kind from the 2 times I'd met him, I was genuinely happy. "I'm so glad," I told her. And I meant it. She sounded warm. She sounded like the little sister I remembered from before life made things complicated. I should have held that warmth more carefully. I should have noticed how quickly it cooled. After that phone call, weeks passed. I heard nothing about the wedding. No save the date, no invitation, no text asking for my dress size or my opinion on venues or any of the things that would normally involve a sister. I told myself it was early. I told myself wedding planning was overwhelming and Danielle was probably buried in decisions. I managed my expectations the way I had always managed them with my family, by keeping them low enough to survive. Then, in January, my mother called. Not to talk about the wedding directly. She called, as she sometimes did, to discuss money. The venue was more expensive than expected, she said. Marcus's family was large. Catering costs had gone up. She was just sharing, she said. Just keeping me in the loop. I listened. I said that sounded stressful. I didn't offer anything, because she hadn't asked for anything. But I noted the conversation, filed it somewhere in the back of my mind, with a small, uncomfortable flag attached. The second call came 2 weeks later, more specific this time. A vendor payment was coming due. They were stretched. It would mean so much if family could step in. I said I'd think about it. And then came the Thursday in February, the cold tea, the text message, no room for you. I called my mother. She answered and immediately adopted the tone she used when she had already decided how a conversation was going to go brisk, slightly defensive, resolved. The venue has a maximum capacity, she said. Marcus's family is very large. We had to make difficult choices. Mum, I said carefully, I'm her sister. These things happen, Claire. It's not personal. Not personal. I called my father after that. He answered in the tired voice he always used when he was caught between my mother's decisions and his own discomfort. There's nothing I can do, he said, which was not the same as saying it was right. I didn't call Danielle that night. I needed to be still first. I needed to understand what I was actually feeling before I let anyone else into it. What I felt, sitting in that quiet apartment with the sounds of the street coming through the window, was not rage. It was something more precise than that. It was recognition. This was who we had always been. I had simply, finally, been shown it directly. The following week was one of the strangest of my life, not because it was dramatic, but because of how calm I stayed inside it. I went about my work. I took my client calls. I designed a logo for a new bakery and revised a brand identity package for a consulting firm. I ate properly and slept adequately and did not cry, which surprised me more than anything. What I did instead of crying was think. I thought about every conversation with my mother over the past 2 months, the vendor mentions, the cost references, the careful groundwork being laid beneath conversations that were supposed to sound casual. I'm good at patterns, it's part of what makes me good at my work, and the pattern here was clear once I stopped giving it the benefit of the doubt. I had been managed, softened, prepared for a request, and the request, I now understood with complete certainty, was coming. Whatever number they needed to make the wedding happen, it was going to be directed at me. Not at a family friend, not at a bank, not at Marcus's family, at me. Because I was the responsible one. Because I had savings. Because I had always, eventually, been there when things fell short. Even when I wasn't invited to the table, I was apparently still expected to help set it. I called Danielle on a Sunday afternoon, 9 days after the text message. I had waited until I was fully ready, until there was no heat left in me, just clarity. She picked up on the third ring. Claire, careful, like she was balancing something fragile. Hi, I said. I just want to understand something. Was this your choice? Not inviting me? A pause that told me everything. The guest numbers were really Danielle. Gently, you don't have to protect the story with me. I'm asking what actually happened. A longer pause. Then, quietly, Mum thought it would be smoother. You know how things get sometimes. There can be tension. There's tension, I said slowly, because I'm the only person in our family who doesn't just accept everything without question. That's not a character flaw. That's just honesty. She didn't respond to that. I hope you have a beautiful wedding, I said, and I meant it genuinely, without irony, but I want you to sit with this conversation. I hung up, and I felt, oddly, lighter, not because anything had been resolved, but because I had said the true thing, clearly and without cruelty, and that was its own kind of release. The call I had been expecting came 4 days later, Wednesday evening, my mother. Her voice was warm in that particular, practised way, the warmth that only arrived when something was needed. Claire, sweetheart, how are you? I almost smiled. Fine, Mum. What's going on? The pivot was smooth, almost graceful. There was a gap in the final vendor payments. The florist and the catering deposit were both due before the weekend. They had done the math and were short. It would mean so much to the whole family, she said, if I could bridge the gap. How much? I asked. A small pause for effect. $3,800. $3,800. I let the silence sit for a moment before I responded. I'll think about it, I said. Of course, she said warmly. But, sweetheart, it's needed by Friday. After I hung up, I sat with that number for a long time, not calculating whether I could afford it. I knew I could, technically. I sat with what it meant. $3,800 to help host a celebration I wasn't permitted to attend. $3,800 from a daughter who hadn't been given a chair at the table, but was still expected to help pay for the room. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from being overworked, but from being undervalued for so long that it starts to feel normal. I had been living inside that exhaustion for years without fully naming it. That Wednesday evening, sitting alone in my apartment with my phone on the table in front of me, I named it, and then I made my decision. I am not a vengeful person by nature. I want to be clear about that, because what I did next is sometimes mistaken for revenge, and I think that misses the point entirely. What I did was much simpler, and in the long run, much more meaningful than revenge. I chose myself. On Thursday morning, I sent my mother a message, short, direct, and kind. Mum, I've thought carefully about this. I'm not able to lend $3,800. I hope the wedding is everything you've planned. I put my phone down and went to make coffee. She called within 6 minutes. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail, my father called. Voicemail, then Danielle called, and I picked up, because she deserved that much. Claire, her voice was different from Sunday, the careful balance was gone. Replaced by something raw and almost frightened. Mum said you won't help with the payment. The venue needs it by tomorrow, or we lose the date. Marcus's family has already booked flights, Danielle. I kept my voice steady. I need to ask you something honestly. If I had excluded you from my wedding and then called you 3 days later asking for $3,800, what would you have done? Silence. I love you, I said. But what happened wasn't okay. And you know it wasn't. You let Mum make a decision that should have been yours, and neither of you thought about what it would mean to ask me for money after that. I can't fund a celebration I wasn't invited to. I think, in your heart, you understand why. A long, fragile silence. And then, I know, 2 words, quiet and undecorated. But they carried 32 years in them. I hope it's a beautiful day, I said honestly. I really do. After I hung up, I sat for a while in the particular silence that follows a hard, right decision. It doesn't feel triumphant, it feels clean. The wedding happened that Saturday. I know because Danielle's account was still public, and I wasn't yet sure what I wanted to do about that. She looked radiant, the venue was lovely, the flowers were there, which meant they had found the money. I found out through my aunt, my mother's older sister, who had always treated me with more warmth than my mother managed, that my parents had borrowed the shortfall from Marcus's parents. My mother had apparently spent several weeks before the wedding making quiet. Pointed comments about Marcus's family's taste in things, so walking to them with a financial request had cost her something, not money, pride, which, for my mother, was the same thing. In the weeks that followed, she called me twice to describe the wedding in detail. I listened both times. I was polite. I did not engage with the undertone of those calls, which was that I was expected to feel guilty for what I hadn't provided, and grateful that she was still speaking to me warmly despite it. I understood that in her accounting of events, I had let the family down. I had made peace with that. Her accounting and mine were different documents. 3 weeks after the wedding, Danielle called. Not about anything practical, just to talk. We spoke for almost an hour about the honeymoon, about her new apartment with Marcus, about small ordinary things. It was the easiest conversation we had shared in years. Near the end, she said something I hadn't expected. I should have stood up for you, she said. I kept waiting for someone else to say something, and nobody did. I'm sorry, Claire, not about the money, about what it meant to leave you out. I held the phone quietly for a moment. That kind of apology, the specific kind, the one that names the real thing, is rare. I had not known how much I needed to hear it until it arrived. "Thank you," I said. "That matters more than you know. Are we okay?" I thought about it genuinely. Not to perform forgiveness, but to actually check. "We're not where we were," I said, "but I think we could get somewhere real if you want to." She said she did. I believed her not completely, not all at once, but enough to begin. My relationship with my parents shifted after all of this. Not dramatically, there was no confrontation, no final scene, no speech delivered while everyone listened. It was quieter than that. I simply stopped performing the version of myself that absorbed everything without response. I stopped being available in the particular unlimited way I had always been. And because my mother values presence, the scaled-back version of mine registered. She didn't fully understand the change, but she adjusted to it. Because the alternative, losing access to me entirely, was apparently more unsettling than accepting a daughter with clearer limits. My father called on my birthday in April. Just to say it. 4 minutes, no agenda. It was one of the nicest calls he had given me in a long time, because it wasn't built around anything. These are the small revolutions, the kind that don't look like justice from the outside, but feel like it from the inside, in the place that matters. Here's what I know, now, from the other side of it. When someone shows you the exact terms of your value to them, when they remove you from the guest list and call you for the bill, they are not being cruel. They are being honest. And that honesty, as much as it hurts, is something you can actually work with. Because you cannot build anything real on a story you're both pretending is true. You do not owe your resources to people who do not make room for your presence. You do not owe your silence to people who have counted on it, and you do not owe an apology for the decision to finally, quietly, treat yourself the way you always deserve to be treated. I was not invited to my sister's wedding, and 3 days later they asked me for $3,800. I said no, not with anger, not with a speech, just with a clear, unhurried, unashamed no. And that one word spoken for the first time in a lifetime of yeses I hadn't chosen was the beginning of everything that actually matters. Peace doesn't come from being included. It comes from knowing that your value was never theirs to decide.